Okay, so welcome back for this second video, and in this second video what we're going to do is to focus on one really critically important step in your research thesis, which is how do you define your research question. And obviously it's a very critical step, because if you miss it, then all the rest of your master thesis is flawed basically. And really what I want you to have in mind is the critical importance of narrowing down your research topic. It's, I think, the best advice that I can give you in this first step. So yeah, why do I say that? It's because actually when you start a research topic, you start from a broad interest. And as I said, a typical mistake in this kind of exercise is to try to do a global essay on, I don't know, electric vehicles, for example, or social innovation, or I don't know what. And actually, when you do that, you really come too broad, and it's very difficult to understand what you want to look at, what you want to investigate, what type of data you are going to use, and how do you answer a precise research question. So all this first step is about narrowing down and also organizing a little bit of a ping-pong game between academic lenses and your topic. And this is the things I'm going to cover quickly in this video. So let's dig in and keep in mind this advice of narrowing down as the best recommendation I can give you in this step. Actually, how does it work for this first step? First, usually you start broad, and that's natural. It's okay to start broad. You start from the world, the known universe, your thoughts, big concepts that you're interested in. And that's fine, but actually it's not. That's really the important thing, is that a field of interest or a big topic actually is not a research question. It's not because you're interested into, I don't know, sustainability in the fashion industry, for example. This is a topic, but it's not a research question, right? So you don't want to confuse the topic with the research question. What's the difference between them is like the topic is still very broad, it's like the sector or the thing you want to look at. And to go from there to a research question, you need to add something. You need to add the lenses that you're going to use to look at your topic, And how do you do that? Well, actually, you do that by bringing in academic literature and theories, and basically academic literature and theories will give you the lenses that you want to use to, make your object speak, to question your object, right? And so by making this ping-pong game between your topic and the academic lenses, the academic literature, you will come up with an original, an interesting research subject and research question. Last element that you need to have in mind in this process is that it has to be realistic, So keep in mind that you only have like 6 or 7 months to complete your master thesis. It may seem a lot, but you will see that it goes extremely fast. So you don't want to lose time, and you have to be accurate enough so that you can gather some data on that, have a precise idea of the literature you're going to use. So that's also why it's critically important to narrow down, okay? Okay, let me give you an example of a past research thesis that I supervised, and I think it's interesting for you to understand how we worked on that with the candidate. So actually it's a story of a student that came to me and explaining that she was really interested in social innovation in emerging countries. And that's fine, that's a broad topic of interest. And actually when we started to discuss, I said, okay, so that's an interesting start, but it's too broad. It needs to be precise, okay? And so what we did is to try to precise. And so when we discussed, I discovered that the candidate had actually had already internships with companies working on social innovation, and more precisely on French multinational enterprises working on bottom of the pyramid initiative. Bottom of the pyramid initiatives are innovations, market innovations that target very low income people in emerging countries. So people typically that earn less than $5 per day. And bottom of the pyramid innovations aim to develop market-driven innovation that will have positive environmental or social contributions, right? And so we discussed about this. It's not only social innovation in itself, which can be very broad, but it's bottom of the pyramid innovation. And then when we tried to explore this topic with the candidate, then we realized that what was really interesting the candidate was that actually when you compare what different multinationals are doing, you have very, very different approaches to bottom of the pyramid management. Some headquarters have a very centralized behavior. That means that they want to have full control on what's happening on the ground, and really also have very profitable innovations very quickly. Whereas other companies have a much more independent, leave more independence to the subsidiaries and to local innovation. And maybe they are okay if it's not profitable, if the innovation is not profitable right now. And so we started to think about those differences. And actually in the end we said, okay, so it's super interesting because actually we could try to understand how bottom of the pyramid innovations are governed, and how headquarters try to govern bottom of the pyramid innovations between different case studies. And actually she had the contacts, so that was something that was doable. So actually by organizing this discussion, we both found a research question, which was in the end the governance of BOP initiatives within French multinational enterprises, a multiple case study. And then we guaranteed that it was feasible in terms of data because she had the contacts with people within French M&Es to investigate the topic, right? So that's kind of the whole process that you have to go through this first step of defining your research topic, right? So actually to do this process, you obviously have to do a large part yourself, and you have two questions to ask yourself. First, questions about the topic, how do you define the phenomenon or the object that you are interested in? I think this is the easy part, right? Because you all have an idea about what you want to focus on, a broad idea. But then you have to challenge it and to, try to question it so as to identify a research question. And so here are the typical questions that you would want to raise is, why is it interesting for management research? Or for professionals, what are the interesting questions, the counterintuitive facts related to your object, For example, in the electric vehicle industry, why doesn't it scale more quickly? That could be an intriguing question, or what are the difficulties? What is counterintuitive? And most importantly, you need to make the link with the contents that you've been studying in the business school and in your curricula, So if you look at it, what are the tools, the theories that you've been studying during your education program at ESCP that could help you question it? If you take your tool from an HR perspective, for example, what would be the questions that would appear in terms of psychology, individual motivation, or other aspects? If you take it from the sociological perspective, well, are there social movements related to the topic? What are the regulations, the collective regulation in the industry, or people outside the firm that try to influence it? You may dig into strategy, into economics, into psychology. Well, you need to try to take a variety of angles to try to question it and identify the most intriguing, interesting entry in your topic, right? And so the whole story in this first step is how do you link the two together, you know? So how do you link your topic with possible academic literatures? That's really the first step that you must explore. To do that, you may find examples in websites that try to organize discussions between academics and the rest of society. And a good example of that is the site theconversation.com. It's a platform for academics to engage into public debates. And actually, I will take an example about that to help you with, well, we'll take randomly an example of an article and see how we can derive research questions or research topics out of it. Okay, so we'll do that in the next video. Now, what I would like to do with you is to take examples of different research topics and discuss them with you and explain you why they make sense, and to give you illustrations of what types of research questions or titles you should come up with. So here, first one, consumers' acceptance of refills and reusable packaging in the grocery industry, a German perspective. So as you see, this one is, well, what is really, I think, good in this title is that it's precise. You know, you immediately know what you are going to find when you look at the title, you know. So it's about customer acceptance, or the willingness of customers to buy refills or buy reusable packaging, and how it affects their perception on the quality. It's really also obvious that it's focused on a particular setting, so grocery industry in Germany. And so you really expect to have detailed data on customers, either through surveys or maybe through detailed interviews, but in this precise context, you know. So for me, this is a very good title because you know what you're looking for immediately when you read the title. Another example that I took from the list of previous master thesis, what's funny? A multicultural comparison of humor in advertising, Apple's Get a Mac campaign in the USA and Japan. And actually what's really interesting in this case is that it's a media campaign that was meant to use humor to sell a product, but it worked in the USA and it was completely not understood in the same way in Japan. And so here, it's really a topic that is also fairly obvious when you read the title. You know, it's going to be a focus in marketing, so because of its focus on advertising, and also it's catchy. So that's also a good sign, you know, when you have like a catchy topic, because it's also a sign that it will interest people and it's interesting yourself. And yeah, it's also quite focused in this international comparison. So that's as well, I think, a good title. Another one, does employees' involvement in sustainability related projects boost the organizational sustainable performance? So here as well, it's a title that I can project myself in as an external examiner or mentoring professor, because here I really see the concept. So you have organizational sustainable performance. So I really would expect the work to dig into the concept of sustainable performance into the literature review and explain how it's being operationalized. Employees' involvement in sustainability. So here you understand as well that it will be rooted more into a human resource literature on employees' involvement, employees' motivation, etc., etc. So, and the last one I wanted to discuss was, well, it's in French, so let me read it in French and then I will translate it into English. It's a little bit conceptual, so it may be tricky, but let me try. So, la fabrique organisationnelle de la société civile, étude des mécanismes et enjeux de la représentation de la société civile dans l'élaboration de la régulation européenne sur le glyphosate. And so let me try to translate it into English. So the organizational fabric of civil society, a study of the issue and mechanisms of representation of civil society in designing European regulations on glyphosate. So here what is good about this topic is that you immediately know first the field of study. It's the European regulation on glyphosate. And also you see like the phenomenon that the candidate is interested in. It's how civil society is involved into public regulation. Because actually within European institutions, there is a process to try to engage with stakeholders, and part of the stakeholders are civil society. And here the candidate was well, the intriguing question at the beginning was, but who is civil society? You know, is it people like you and me, or formal organizations such as NGOs, or other people, or other communities of interest? How is it being organized? And actually the way European Union organized this process is very influential on what is actually civil society. So this work is more a sociological and qualitative work focused on the process of involving civil society. And it makes also a lot of sense on a very important regulatory issue, right? So now that you should get a sense of what is a good and a bad research topic and research question. Typical mistakes you should avoid. So the typical mistakes are first that often typical mistake is that the topic is too broad, and so it's completely impossible to answer, right? An example of that is this topic, IT in the third millennium. Well, really, what do you want to do with this topic? You know, you immediately imagine like this kind of gossip report on the fact that IT needs to be transformed and will be increasingly important in the third millennium, etc. But you really, it's so broad, you don't really expect anything clear out of it. So it's a very, very bad sign when you have this type of title, right? Another aspect is the subject may be trite or banal, already being covered and absolutely not original. And at the extreme opposite, you may have some topics that are framed in a too complex way. You know, for example, some topics may have 2 or 3 different dimensions, and so it may be really complicated to make sense of it, and also for the candidate to operationalize it. An example of that is this one. Do the contrasted needs of stakeholders slow down the CSR adoption pace in multinational companies in economic downturn periods? Well, super complicated because there are plenty of different concepts. So contrasted needs of stakeholders, it's not immediately understandable which are these stakeholders and what do you mean by contrasted needs. Not obvious to me at least. CSR adoption pace in multinational companies, super difficult also to think how you theorize and how you operationalize this idea of the pace of adoption of CSR. And it's in the context of economic downturn periods, but is it the only variable? You really don't know. So actually you don't see clearly what's the problem. And you have plenty of different complicated concepts. So this one would be, you know, there is this willingness to frame it from an academic point of view, which is good, but it's maybe too complex to really understand what's the point, you know. So you don't want to lose the basic point of your research thesis when you formulate the research question. So overall, with a good subject, you can focus your efforts and avoid losing your time wandering on a too large literature. And it's very good also, it will be time efficient for you. So good research question, the crash test, you know, for your research question is it a real question? Does it have an obvious answer or not? Of course, you don't want a topic where the answer is obvious from the beginning. Second aspect, it needs to be original and not tackled yet. How do you do that? Well, maybe you can use specific literature, but that has not been applied in your context of research. You know, for example, think about the adoption of technologies, but not used on some technologies. Well, I don't know, it's just an example. But you know, the object itself may be original. Also, you may take something that has been studied, but you want to focus on another angle, you know, on an original analytical angle, and we'll give illustrations about that in the next video. Also, it needs to be accurate. So keep in mind, narrow down, narrow down, narrow down. It may be difficult and you may have the impression to lose the interest of the topic, but don't worry. I mean, you need to be accurate for you to save time to know what you're looking for and where to look it for the data, for the literature, etc. You'll get tremendous time benefit if you frame your subject enough. Last one, it needs, no, well, it's not the last one, but it needs to be grounded in the academic literature. And yeah, last element also is that think about your time constraints for this work. So it must not be overly ambitious. And most importantly, it needs to be super interesting for you. That's the killing criteria. You know, if you're engaged into a process that you have to do it by yourself for the most of it, and that you're not really deeply interested into it, you're going to suffer. So really my recommendation is take something where you know your guts must be in this work. Okay, so just to come up, well, here so think about different ways to question your topic. You know, maybe the question of what, how, why. Use also different angles. So you may be interested by the link here with the video to show the diversity of social sciences and maybe open your eyes on different ways to question a topic. And yeah, take also the opportunity of your own experience. You know, if you, for example, have an apprenticeship in a company or have internships in companies that are really interesting because they are B Corps or they are engaged in sectors that you're interested in, well, use it, you know, be opportunistic about that. Okay, this is it for this second video, and in the next one we're going to take an example of how you can start from an interest in a newspaper article or a broad academic article, and how you can design your topic out of it. Okay, so see you in the next video.